Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. I'm here today with Umama, Anam, and we have a special guest, Feriba, on the podcast with us today. So today we're actually going to be covering what's going on in Afghanistan. I'm sure you guys have seen stuff on social media, through Instagram, Twitter, news outlets even. Biden made a speech. A bunch has been going on. So we wanted to take a chance today to kind of talk about it as Muslims, as young Muslims in the community, like all the discourse that we see going on. And I think before we start, we want to introduce Feriba as a guest that came on today. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Feriba. I'm a sophomore in college. There's not much to say. I mean, I haven't done anything too extravagant because not yet, at least. But hopefully, when things settle down, I can, go to a four-year college. Get some things happening, join some clubs. You know, I'm kind of into humanitarian and organizing stuff. So hopefully, with that, I can be more involved.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, you know why you're here, but would you
Mm-hmm.
like to tell them why you're here? And by the way, we really wanted, obviously, a guest for this episode, and we tried really, really hard, which I think it's kind of a good disclaimer to say that this episode could have been done a lot earlier, but we were trying to find someone that would be able to speak on this, obviously, because we want to hear this from, a perspective of someone who's Afghani, and Fariba over here is. So, do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm an Afghan American. I was born in America, but my family, they all, um, lived in Afghanistan their whole lives. And my mother, she had to actually move to Pakistan because of the war and what was going on in Afghanistan. It was becoming too horrible. So they had to flee to Quetta. It's like a small little province in Pakistan. So she lived there for most of her life and then came to America. But my father was the one who actually lived in Afghanistan and experienced the Mujahideen and the war. And that being said, he had to come here to America in the 90s on a work visa. So, with that background, it's I was born here and I don't really know what they went through. I can never experience it, and thank God. That's the whole reason that I came here in the first, or they came here in the first place, was so me and my siblings and them could have a better life. And it really sucks that that has to be the reality of Afghans. And yeah, it's a horrible situation that's going on right now.
Definitely. Do you still have any family that lives in Afghanistan? Or are you
Many.
guys all here?
Oh no, it's only I only have three families that are here in America. All of the rest of my family, they're scattered across Afghanistan. Some are in Kandahar, some are in Kabul, some are in Herat. So they're kind of all going through this, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
horrible.
No, definitely, 100%. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, I think so we've been seeing a lot, right, about stuff that's been going on. I think one of the biggest viral things we saw was the plane taking off and
Yeah.
everyone's posting and people were
It was
hanging on the plane,
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
right? So I guess maybe to start off on the topic for people that don't know, and I guess for all of us to educate each other, we could run through maybe some history of Afghanistan and how we got to the point that we are today.
Yeah.
So, Mama Anam, do you
Yeah,
wanna-
so I did a lot of research just on, because even myself, I wanted to educate myself on how exactly did the Taliban come into power, and what steps were taken in order for them to come to power. And the thing is, even for me, before I researched all of this, I thought the Taliban and everything, it all occurred in early 2000s because of 9/11.
Right.
But the thing is, Afghanistan has been seeing horrific wars, and they've been in war with several different Western countries, or countries in Europe, for as long as Afghanistan has been a country. 18 early 1800s to early 1900s, they were at war with the British, because they were fighting over the land. And on top of that, even with Pakistan, surrounding neighboring Muslim countries have been not really helping with Afghanistan as well. So ever since then, they haven't known anything but war, and it's kind of really heartbreaking, only because it's people see it as oh yeah, we're trying to, I guess, protect them from the Taliban, or really corrupt government. But the thing is, them occupying and trying to annex Afghanistan isn't helping. It's not making
it's
things
not.
better. And also this isn't really talked about in news as well, but the thing is Afghanistan has like really good resources too, and people are like, oh yeah, the world is relying on Afghanistan's resources, but that's not the case. You guys are literally using them and like, you know, terrorizing all these civilians. And also throughout the history of Afghanistan, there have been millions and millions of Afghanis that have been replaced, or like, you know, that had to basically leave their own country to go to like a safer I guess country. And like even then they weren't really accepted, like in Pakistan, like they weren't accepted. They were basically like their backs were turned on by their own Muslim neighbors, which is
so
also
unfortunate.
which is also really disheartening. And then we can also talk about like in between, before 9/11, there was also like, I guess, unstable government, if you like, that was, it was really unstable. And like even then people are like, oh yeah, you know, the Taliban is like said that they were going to try and bring rights to women, but that's not the case as all as we know. But in fact, in the middle of like 1950s, Afghanistan was under power of, I forgot it was like a prime minister or president. They were under power, and they actually helped get women some right, you know, allow them to get some education, or, you know, actually open and freely walk around in Afghanistan without any fear of like people taking away their rights. So that's one thing that we should also discuss. It's like the amount of rights that have been taken from women and children. So I feel like that's somewhat a brief background, but yeah, that's the main part of it. Unless you want to add anything more.
No, I think you hit all the
Yeah.
all the nails on the head. Yeah. I mean, there's no I mean, there's a reason why the country is like nicknamed the Graveyard of Empires. I mean, there's so many different nations and, you know, people coming in trying to like take our resources. One of the biggest thing is our resources. Like we have like mountains just full of silver and gold and fresh water, and we never could have actually used that or utilized that for ourselves to build up our nation. You know, it's just constantly been taken from us. So.
And I feel like also every single time when Afghanistan tries to go forward, it's taken like several years back because of these other countries that are interfering with them. And what I've seen a lot, like a saying that I've seen a lot about Afghanis, is that they're the most resilient people you'll ever
100%.
meet. And just because about the amount of stuff that their people have gone through, and I have so many like Afghani friends, and like I can just tell like the love that they have for their country, the love that they have for their people and culture, like it could never compare to anyone else. And the fact that they're trying their hardest, and it's really hard. Like, you know, we talked to you before how hard it is to really you know, help when you're like in a different country, in a whole different world. So I feel like that's another topic that we'll talk about as well.
No, definitely. Yeah, I feel like the Afghani people, Afghanistan hasn't had a stable government. Like that at least has lasted a few years. Or like, and like people that are born in generations that are born in Afghanistan have been under different administrations and different governments. And some of like the most recent, like imagine being born in the American takeover democracy, and now this is all happening, right? Like, what do you expect to happen when you constantly change governments and people are constantly being pulled out and new people are coming in? Like, the byproduct is like, sure, you're trying to make it a better place, but the byproduct is like the people are being affected that are living there, right?
Absolutely.
And their own president, Fu, and I saw that too, like, you know, like obviously for his protection, his family protection, leaving all the civilians behind.
Exactly.
So I mean, what does that say?
And I feel like one thing that like we all currently should or do know what's going on in Afghanistan currently, but I kind of want to talk about like America's play in this whole role.
Yeah, because it plays a big part.
It does play a big part. So I feel like majority of what people know is because of like the 9/11 attacks. Basically what America did was send several troops into Afghanistan to basically, I guess, protect. And the thing is, they usually say to like, you know, protect like Afghanis from like their own like corrupt government. But the thing is, the reason why America did that was to protect themselves, and they thought that, you know, like Osama was hiding in there, and he was like basically harboring a bunch of terrorists, and like they bombed Afghanistan like so many times because they thought Osama was there. And I'm sorry, like just because you like don't have like direct I guess like coordinations of where like Osama bin Laden might have been or whatever, that doesn't give you an excuse to like bomb like every quarter of every like inch of Afghanistan. You know, you're like really risking a bunch of civilians' lives. And at a point, like Afghanistan was known to have the highest infant fatality rate. So there was like a lot of children that wouldn't even make it past to the year like age 5, which is honestly like disheartening. And like even because of over the course of ever since like America came to Afghanistan, they have killed millions of Afghanis, and even recently we have seen how many Afghanis have been killed. And like anytime I see anything on the news, they say like, oh, 15 American civilians have died. I'm sorry, but you have been terrorizing like Afghanis since like day one. So I'm sorry, like, like some Americans have been killed, and that is really disheartening. But the thing is, you put those Americans there, you know, and like you aren't even taking into account to how many Afghanistani like lives have been lost. So I feel like that's one thing that the media really like butchers up, is they highlight everything that like, oh, poor Americans, like look what has happened, but they never highlight anything of like what Afghanis have gone through.
Yeah, like when I think it was last week where there were attacks on the airport and like 13 U.S. troops died.
That's
you know, I was a bit confused because what I saw in the news was they kept calling it like a horrific attack, which it was absolutely, but I was kind of confused because like they were only saying like, my impression was that only 13 people died.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like 13 people, but you keep saying like U.S. troops. What about the rest of the victims? And then a few days later, where the like total count came out, 170 people. And it's like, why weren't they with the 13 people that were on the headlines?
Exactly.
You know, it's just like, why are they an aftershock?
Yeah. And they were killed on their own soil. You know, they were killed in their own homeland, a homeland where, you know, initially when they were born, they thought it was going to be like, you know, this was going to be safe. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And that's something they can't control, especially when all you've grown up around is like, you know, unstable government. There's not much like even Afghani people can do. Like, what can they do? You know, they're terrorized, they're in fear half the time. And it's just like really disheartening to see all the things that they've been put through because of other countries.
Definitely. So like now we've been seeing a lot of social media posts about like the Taliban, right? And then there's like there's like two stances that I've seen on social media, right? There's been the people that are like not pro-Taliban, but they're like, okay, they're better than the U.S. Then I've seen people that are like, the Taliban are terrorizing the people in Afghanistan. And I'd love to know your opinion. I guess like apparently back in like the 1950s, right? There was like a time when a lot of the royals in Afghanistan left the country. And then so those families are tied to that, and then I guess they're from the outside looking in. And then there's the people that currently have family in Afghanistan, and then they're saying a different thing too, right? So I guess like I don't like, I'm not fully educated on that part of it, but I'd love to hear from an Afghani perspective. I guess
I've heard those two perspectives. You know, those are going around that like, you know, America can't be worse than the Taliban or vice versa.
Right.
And personally, my standpoint is that, you know, the Taliban won't be good for the people.
Right.
You know, they're there to terrorize people. They're there to control people. You know, what I kind of don't like is that they're using, I guess, Islam, the religion of Islam, you know, as a way to control people and say like, oh, like, you know,
Sharia law, this and that.
Like, let's set this law in accordance to Islam, which no, first of all, like that has like they're brutal, you know, they're totalitarian, you know, that's not how Islam is like. And not only does it like terrorize the people, it gives the outside the perspective that we're violent,
and it like weaponizes Islam in a way.
Absolutely. You know, people, when you use faith as a way to control people, you can't really, like, the people can't really argue with that. Because it's like, there's a higher power involved with that control. Because they kind of use it like, I'm not controlling you, God's controlling you. And with that, the people are kind of like, first of all, they don't want to die. So that's why they have to keep their head down. And it's also like, they kind of get brainwashed into thinking like, shoot, I don't want to go to hell. And they know that. The Taliban know that well, which is why they use that tactic, and it's just horrible. So America, they shouldn't have came here in the first place, but then the Taliban are also extremely, I don't believe that there's a lesser of two evils. I think they balance each other out. I just wish that, the Afghan people could just find peace, you know?
And also, like, going off of what you said, like, them basically using Islam to, I guess, like, convince the people of Afghanistan. Around 1996 is when, like, the Taliban kind of came into, like, creation and, like, rose to power. And basically, like, at that point, Afghanis have already been through so much war, and, like, they were actually out of famine as well. Like, there was, like, they couldn't really fend for themselves. And when someone or like a group comes into power and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna use Islam as, like, I guess, a basis of how we're gonna govern people. And especially when you use Islam, if you're Muslim and you know how peaceful Islam is as a religion, you take that as, like, okay, we're, like, exhausted. This is as best as we can get. They basically settled in a way as well, because they didn't look too much into it. They're like, okay, whatever we can get at this point, we're fine with. So at that point, they accepted it. They didn't really question it as much. But little did they know that basically what the Taliban was doing is they were basically twisting what Islam is. And to any of our, like, non-Muslim viewers, like, I hope that you guys are educated enough to know that, like, this is not what Islam is about. When you first hear of Islam, even for me, like, the first thing that I think of is peace, and that's something that they're making Muslims look bad, and that's why, like, even America, like, they have created, like, a stereotype that, like, Muslims are terrorists. And I feel like a lot of us, we grew up in, like, post 9/11 America, and, like, like, here and there, like, people make fun of Muslims all the time, and the reason for that is because of them, so the effect that they have on, like, not just, like, Afghanistan, but, like, just, like, the view, like, how Muslims are seen is so is such a bigger picture. Exactly. It's like, it's really, it sucks seeing it. Even though I'm not Afghani, like, as a Muslim, I just hate seeing it. What like, Afghanistan's going through, what they're putting, like, the Muslims through, like, just the religion of Islam through. It's just really, like, disrespectful.
Right. I feel like there's a pre-2001 Taliban, and then there's the today Taliban.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people don't realize they're two different things.
They
It's not
are.
the same Taliban, right?
Exactly.
Whether that's good or bad, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I guess we'll find out, right? From how the people react. Let's talk about Western culture. I feel like that intersects, Western culture and Islam intersect, right? And then there's U.S. really tried doing it by pushing this democracy, and, like, obviously it failed, and look what happened, right? But then I guess there's women's rights. There's so many other things in Western culture that Islam also gives women's rights, right?
Exactly.
But then I guess Eastern countries don't take it the same way.
They don't.
Right? And then I guess the surrounding countries all have like, we did the honor killing podcast earlier.
Yeah.
We talked about how women's rights vary country by country, and especially in the Middle East, it's not good at all.
Yeah.
Right? I guess taking these values of women's rights and what we have in America and applying it in the East and applying it to Afghanistan, how does that look like when it comes with Sharia law and Islam and, I guess, the intersectionality of it? I feel like that's when it gets complex. Then it's like, okay, are we being activists and advocating for women's rights in Islam, or are we advocating for Western culture to be applied in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
And I guess, like, as three women, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I feel like a lot of the times what happens is when we compare, like, Eastern, or, like, for example, like, women's right, if we look at an Eastern perspective and we look at a Western perspective, people will automatically lean towards the Western perspective, only because it's so clear cut, it's like, in America, women's right, they can work, yada yada yada, whatever, it's, like, very obvious. But the thing is, in Eastern countries, like, I'm not saying, like, what they do in Eastern countries, majority of the times it isn't right, but they look at the bad of it. They don't look at the, like, some of the good that has been happening, obviously, because it hasn't been, like, I guess, emphasized as much. But also in Islam, like, we really, put women on a pedestal. They have rights. And just because, like I said, again, like, Western media or just Western people in general, they have this stereotype that they create themselves, not because they know about Islam. They create it themselves. And the thing is, like, the whole world sees it as that. Even though Eastern countries, like, are part of that, they see it as Islam as that too. Like, oh yeah, they don't respect women. They don't give women any rights. And that's another reason why Taliban, like, is seen as so bad, because they're, like, they are bad, but, like, I guess that's where it gets, like, mixed as well, because they're like, oh yeah, they're Islam, they take away women's right, yada yada yada, and, like, that's where Taliban is, like, mixing up the religion as well. So I guess it's just, like, twists in words when it comes to, like, what women's right is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and and if people get really confused as to where women's rights are in Islam, I mean, just take a look at Bibi Khadija. I mean, she was a woman. She was a powerhouse. She was an owner of a business. You know, she had rights to her own money, and she was a very powerful woman. Like, you know, she's what you describe as, you know, modern feminism today. Like, she's like owns everything. You know, she's powerful, and that's what I see whenever I think of rights in Islam. It's like the modesty that coincides with owning yourself, and, you know, like the power you hold. That's what I see when women's rights in Islam. And I feel like that in the East, it's not really brought out as much as it should.
Yeah. And honestly, even though I said like people lean towards Western, honestly, like West and East, it's at the same like patriarchal culture, you know, like patriarchal society. Like they're both at the same level. Like whether we like to accept it or not, just because, you know, America has given women's rights a lot quicker than like Eastern culture has, at the end of the day, it like no matter where we go, it's gonna be a patriarchal society, and we're trying to like steer away from that. But Eastern and Western need to acknowledge that they're at the same level. They're not better than anyone else. And to me, and hopefully everyone else that, you know, like is aware of Islam, to me, like when it comes to Islam and women's right, I feel like Islam is the only religion that does it right, or only like, I guess, religion that does it right, and that's how it should be.
But again, because of the way it's interpreted to especially non-Muslims, to people in, you know, in the Western culture, it's seen as it being not for women.
Yeah,
or
and
not,
it's
you know,
because of like, you know, groups like the Taliban and like even like Saudi, like, you know, they like oppress women too, you know, like from the smallest things, like they couldn't even drive like a couple of years ago. So I feel like it's these there's other like groups that are making us look bad, but I wouldn't even consider them true Muslims, you know, because if they knew what Islam truly was, they would know the rights women have. What, like, we don't condemn, like we don't like accept war, you know, that's like a solution, or
and
killing
that's the
people.
thing, like, in my head, in my, like, when I hear these things and I see these things, it's so simple. It's so simple if you just look at Islam.
Exactly.
But when we mix all these different things, that's when it becomes like a stirring pot of all, like, you know, like miscommunication, misinformation, and, you know, again, going back and forth, and that's where the problem comes in.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, Islam is simple. What makes
simple.
What makes it more complicated than it is because of us. It's because of like modern day society. And I feel like that's where people, like, at the end of the day, it's on you. You should do your own research. And even for this podcast, you know, like everything we're talking about, like if you don't agree with something, go ahead and research it, you know, like everything that we've said, we've done our research. Like we have our notes out. We have credible people that are Afghani, you know, that are speaking from like experience and like what they've seen themselves. But yeah, you know, it all comes down to like educating yourself and knowing what you're talking about at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. So the reason I brought that up, right, is because I have someone that I know, right, who's actually on the other end of the spectrum as you, as in like people that has like family there and stuff, right? And they're not pro-Taliban per se, but they're like the lesser of two evils, like how you mentioned, right? And they were talking about how like their family there, like the Taliban that's there now, this is from their perspective, right, is different from the Taliban that was there like 2001, that was really oppressive. And right now, this Taliban's, they still suck, but they're trying to be better, and they're trying to become a state, just like those in the UAE, just like the other states around it. They're trying to become a state. They're trying to implement Sharia law, whatever that means. We'll see, right? When it comes to them.
And I feel like that's also really hard to say because it's just recently they came to power. So like honestly, like actions speak louder than words. So like for my personal opinion, like up until like we actually see them like speaking on what they've preached, then we can be like, okay, yes, they're somewhat better than America. But right now, to me, it seems at the same level.
Yeah, I think the best stance we could take right now is like pray that they treat the people there with respect, and they become better than what they were, right?
And ultimately find peace, because I think
that's
the biggest thing right now.
And going off of like what you said, like what can we do?
Right.
It's like, you know, pray, of course, is number one thing. But what other, like, you know, you said you like to, you know, I guess be like you're proactive and like, you know, reaching out or like finding ways to help like other people. What would you think would be the best way to like help Afghanistan right now, as someone who's like in a different country, as someone who's not Afghani? Like what can we do to basically make a difference, or even just help as little as we can?
I think the most you can do, or the most important thing that you could do, is be aware and educated, you know, constantly keeping up on what's going on, because I feel like the moment we forget about these things and we forget about these atrocities, then these stories go unheard and they die out. And that's something that we as a Muslim ummah should avoid. We should constantly be knowing what's happening to our like Muslim brothers and sisters in the East. So I think education and, like you said, finding the credible sources and knowing where to find your information, I think, is the most important thing. Just keep updated and keep them in your prayers. At this point, it's out of our hands because it's an issue that it pertains to something so much bigger than us. Like if it was within this country, if it was injustice within America on Afghan, communities, then there would be a way to be like, okay, we can call our legislators, we can call this, we can call that, and make stuff happen. But this is just sort of like
It's international.
It's international.
Tough. It's not much impact we could have.
And especially when the president said that he wants nothing to do with Afghanistan, he ended this war,
Pulled the Band-Aid off really quick.
And it's hard to like know where to support the Afghans who are currently in Afghanistan because the president himself, the leader of this country, is just not budging. Which is infuriating to me, but it's such a difficult situation.
Also with ways to help, what I've noticed, like people reaching out to me or just in general, like there have been a lot of like families from Afghanistan that have been coming to America, and there's like need of interpreters or like just people that could like house these Afghan families that have nowhere to go. And if you guys have like an open home or just like know of anyone, definitely like I guess reach out or spread the word as much as you can, because at the end of the day, like what I like doing is like putting yourselves in their shoes, like coming to a whole new country, abandoning your family, abandoning everything that you've grown up with just to be safe. So I feel like definitely, and us as Muslims, that's something we should always do, keep our arms open to others and help other Muslims out. And I feel like that's really, really one of the important steps we can take to help in just as any way we can.
Right. I wonder, are there organizations for like shelters for like I guess Afghan refugees?
I've heard it through like word of mouth and like just like people like that know about it, but definitely like inshallah, like when we or even you can provide us with any other like shelters or resources that are actually helping families of Afghanistan or like donating, we will definitely always have like a link in our bio that can help. Because even we're trying to use our platform as best as we can, and if anyone has a good platform, or even if you don't have a platform, like I wouldn't consider myself to have a platform, but I make sure that I'm posting on social media, because there are a lot of people that aren't aware, and especially living in America, the news that we see is very Americanized, and it's going to be in the favor of Americans. Like even when you were talking about it, like they were emphasizing 13 Americans killed. Okay, what about the 160 Afghanis that were killed? So I honestly try to steer away from like American news resources, because like they're not credible to me, especially because they always favor the Americans. But like definitely as much as you can, educate yourself, donate any resource that you see, spread the word,
and
help
make
out
sure
in any way
just to add on that they're reliable resources.
Because you never know. Like I feel like there have been a lot of like charities where you never know. We don't even double check sometimes. You're like, oh no, like we want to help out, we're gonna donate right away, and good for you. That's like your first reflex.
Instagram scam ones that people are posting on their story.
Exactly. Then definitely make sure for yourself. No matter like what influencer posted, no matter like who posts it, you should always double check for yourself, because you honestly you don't want that like on your shoulders.
We had technical difficulties, sorry, so we had to cut, but I'm happy it happened at the end and not in the middle. But that's going to do it for us today. Leave a comment, let us know your thoughts, and I guess if you have any other ways that to help contribute, right?
Credible sources, charities, anything.
Leave it in the comment section. Share this with people. This is a form of education, right? We're discussing it, so I think that's also valuable too. But thank you so much for coming on.
Of course,
really appreciate
thanks for having me. This is amazing. It's like I was actually really like, when I got the like message from Hannah asking me to be on the show or like to talk about Afghanistan, it was almost like a miracle, because I was kind of sitting there and my family from Afghanistan was calling constantly and like crying, and everything was just so heightened, and I was just seeing the news and it was just really affecting me, and I'm like, how can I help? Like, how can I express what's going on and make my voice heard so like through the Afghan people, I can kind of like get the message out there and kind of like show people what's going on. And then I got the message and I was like, oh my god, like this is my moment, this is perfect. So
Definitely.
thank you for giving me this opportunity. It truly
Of
is.
course. We're glad you came on and shared your insight.
And I think like
Really
this could be a whole nother episode, but we also didn't touch on like the Pakistan being in the same region,
yeah.
other Muslim
Oh.
countries not helping. That's a whole
Right,
other
that
episode. There's a lot to
is-
talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like the
Yeah.
highlight of
this
his.
could have been an hour,
Right.
but
Exactly.
we're gonna give you guys, you know, the short rundown of it. But again, thank you so much for coming, Feriba. Well, I think that is it for us. And again, make sure you comment, like, share this video, and we'll see you inshallah next time. Salam.